like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey yo, listen.
What you want?
Drop it low to the flow. Oh, oh,
Like it like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Oh, are you ready for this?
Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive?
Always.
So remember all that talk about a possible TikTok ban?
Oh, yeah. How could anyone forget that?
We're gonna kind of unpack how people reacted to it, not just to the initial threat of it, but
Right.
also, when it turned out that it wasn't gonna actually happen.
Right.
What's so interesting is this goes way beyond just an app, It really shows how these platforms, these digital platforms are so intertwined with our lives now.
Yeah, it's really true. The initial reaction on TikTok was almost like a digital panic attack.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not just talking about people who are, just casually scrolling through videos.
Right, right. Imagine you're like a creator, and you've built your whole career on TikTok.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
wasn't just about losing followers or whatever. It was your income.
Right.
It was your community that you've worked so hard to build.
Yeah. We saw creators with millions of followers just facing the very real possibility that they would lose their livelihood.
Wow.
But it was even deeper than that. Imagine, spending years building a community, building your brand, pouring your heart into your content, and then suddenly, poof, it's gone.
It's all gone.
You know?
Yeah,
I think it tapped into a primal fear of loss for a lot of people.
totally. And especially for those smaller creators, right? The ones who maybe didn't have a presence on other platforms.
Exactly.
And they found their voice on TikTok. They found their people on TikTok.
Yeah, for a lot of people, especially in those marginalized communities,
Yeah.
TikTok wasn't just entertainment. It was a place of belonging.
Right.
It was a place to connect with people who shared their experiences, their identities.
For sure.
The potential loss was so much greater than just losing funny videos. It was about losing a space where they felt seen, where they really felt seen.
It makes you realize that these platforms, they're almost like extensions of ourselves in a way. And in the midst of all of this, fear and uncertainty, what I thought was so fascinating was that wave of humor that came out of it.
Yes.
The memes were incredible.
Yeah, well, it's a classic coping mechanism, right?
Yeah,
When
sure.
things feel totally out of control, humor can be a way to reclaim some sense of agency.
Right.
It lets us process difficult emotions,
Mm.
and connect with other people who are going through the same thing. Shared laughter, especially when you're facing something really difficult, can be so powerful.
Absolutely. It was like the entire platform was saying, okay, we're freaking out internally, but we're going to laugh about it too.
Yeah.
And some of those memes, brilliant. Like the one where people were joking about comparing the TikTok ban to the fall of Rome.
Oh, yeah. I remember that one. That's such a good example of how humor can be a way to kind of reframe a situation,
Right.
By comparing it to this massive historical event, it sort of minimizes the threat, while at the same time acknowledging that,
Yeah.
okay, this could actually have a really significant cultural impact.
Lord, sure.
Plus, it's just funny.
It's hilarious. And it's it was interesting to see how specific trends emerged within the memes. I remember there were so many jokes about moving to Canada if the ban happened, right? Which, kind of speaks to that whole I want to get out of here, I want to escape this.
Mhm.
And then you had all those memes about breaking into government servers.
Oh, yeah.
Which had this this defiance, this playful rebellion against the powers that be.
Yeah. Don't forget the whole last TikTok trend,
Oh my God, yeah.
where everyone was scrambling to download all their favorite
Had
content.
a digital fire sale.
It was. Everybody was trying to preserve those inside jokes and those little shared moments before they potentially disappeared forever.
It's such a good point because that scramble to archive everything really speaks to how these digital spaces, they're ephemeral. We're so used to having everything right there at our fingertips, but this was a stark reminder that, poof, it could all go away.
Yeah.
And it also kind of highlighted, I think, our growing dependence on these platforms, not just for entertainment, but for connection, for community, for income even.
Exactly. And what's so interesting is that this whole ordeal actually brought to light some serious political undercurrents that, especially younger users, they don't always think about.
What were some of those political tensions that you saw kind of bubbling up?
Well, for a lot of people, it wasn't just about losing an app.
Right.
It brought up these bigger questions, about freedom of expression and the government's role in actually controlling what happens online.
It's true.
Suddenly, things like digital rights, which can seem kind of abstract, they became very real and personal.
It's like that saying, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. You
Yeah.
know, it is like suddenly these younger users who've grown up with internet as just a get-in, like it's always been there. They were forced to confront this idea that actually their online world could be impacted by decisions that are being made in Washington.
Absolutely.
And not everybody agreed with those decisions.
Right, right. There was a lot of criticism, especially from those who felt like the government was focusing on TikTok while ignoring, other more pressing issues.
Totally.
So it sparked this debate about priorities and about like what matters most to different generations.
Yeah, that's a good point. And for the creators, this like sudden threat to their income, it really showed how risky it can be to depend on just one platform.
Oh, for sure.
They were scrambling to diversify, like promoting their Instagram, their YouTube, anything to not have all their eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
It was a real wake-up call, I think, for the entire creator economy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really was. And it makes you wonder, what happens when we invest so much of ourselves, our time, our creative energy into just one space online?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think this whole situation forced people to really confront just how fragile these digital ecosystems really are.
Yeah.
We put so much of ourselves into these platforms, but at the end of the day, we don't control them.
Right.
And I think it was a real stark reminder that diversification is key, not just for creators, but for everyone.
It's true, yeah. It's like, putting all your savings into one stock.
Yeah.
What happens if the stock crashes?
Exactly. And this wasn't just about entertainment, right? This was about people's livelihoods, their communities, even their identities being tied to a platform that could just disappear overnight.
Right.
And that really brings us to, I think, the heart of those political tensions that we were talking about.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. I think
Yeah.
it's worth digging into a little bit more.
Okay.
What exactly are digital rights, and how did this situation with TikTok bring all this to the forefront?
Well, digital rights, they encompass, a whole range of issues, basically anything that relates to our freedoms and our protections in the online world.
Mm-hmm.
So think data privacy, freedom of expression, access to information, net neutrality, all of that.
Right.
And in the context of this potential TikTok ban, a lot of concerns came up about, the government's ability to actually control what we can see and share online.
So some people felt like if TikTok was banned, that would set like a dangerous precedent,
Exactly.
potentially opening the door for even more restrictions down the line.
Yeah, there was this real fear that this could be a slippery slope,
Right.
If the government can ban TikTok, what's stopping them from banning other platforms or even restricting certain types of content that they don't like?
Based on their agenda.
Yeah. And it really raises some questions about censorship and how do we balance national security with individual freedoms?
Right. Especially in this digital age. It's a complex issue.
It is.
And as you mentioned before, this situation really seemed to galvanize younger users in particular,
Oh, absolutely.
many of whom may not have even really, thought about these things before.
This wasn't just happening in some abstract political sphere,
Right.
This was directly impacting their lives, their communities, their favorite app.
It was real.
Yeah, it forced them to engage with these big issues.
Mhm.
Digital rights, government overreach, even just like the power dynamics of these platforms.
I think that's one of the most significant things to come out of this whole saga.
I agree.
It wasn't just about TikTok.
Well,
It was like a wake-up call for an entire generation
Mhm.
to recognize how powerful, but also how potentially fragile the online world that they live in really is.
And their voices were heard.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a huge online movement to stop the ban.
Wow.
And young people were really leading the charge.
Awesome.
There were petitions, social media campaigns, even organized protests.
Wow.
And it really demonstrated a level of awareness and engagement that I think is so encouraging.
It gives you hope,
Yeah.
to see young people getting out there mobilizing and advocating for something they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, those efforts, along with some other things, led to the ban actually being averted.
Do you remember what the vibe was like online when that news broke? Oh, it was amazing. Just this collective sigh of relief
Right.
across the internet. You could feel it.
Yeah.
Creators were ecstatic.
Of course.
Users were celebrating.
Rightfully so.
And there was this sense of triumph that, they had collectively pushed back against something that they saw as unjust.
It's amazing how a shared threat can bring people together like that.
Mhm.
Even online, there was such a sense of solidarity. Like, we did it.
Yeah, it wasn't just about saving an app.
Right.
It was about protecting this community, a space for people to express themselves, to connect with each other.
And that sense of community, that shared experience, even though it was rooted in a lot of anxiety and uncertainty, ultimately it made those bonds between users and creators even stronger.
It did. It also showed just how powerful collective action can be in the digital age.
Yeah, we often think of online spaces as being kind of, individualistic.
Right.
But this situation, this whole TikTok thing, showed that when people come together, when they raise their voices, they can actually make a difference.
They can. And it wasn't just about making noise either.
Right.
Creators really started taking the idea of diversifying their online presence seriously. They were promoting their other platforms, exploring new ways to connect with their audiences, building more sustainable careers that weren't dependent on just one single app.
So it was like, even though the threat of the ban was incredibly stressful,
Oh, yeah.
it kind of pushed these creators to be more resilient, more adaptable, even more entrepreneurial in a way.
It really was. It was like a crash course in digital survival.
Yeah.
And I think that resilience is going to serve them well, especially as the whole online landscape continues to evolve.
Right, because who knows what's going to happen next.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about the creators either, right?
Right.
This whole situation, I think, had implications for all of us.
For the users, the lurkers, the casual scrollers,
Everyone.
what were some of the key takeaways for those of us who, maybe we don't have millions of followers, but we still rely on these platforms to get our information, to connect with people, just for entertainment?
I think the biggest takeaway is we shouldn't take any of these platforms for granted.
Yeah.
We're just so used to having them there at our fingertips. But like we saw with TikTok, things can change really fast.
Yeah, for sure.
And that reliance, it can be risky.
It makes you wonder, what other platforms are you most reliant on? What would you do if they just suddenly disappeared?
Yeah.
It's like a digital version of that, that desert island scenario.
I love that.
What would you bring with you?
Yeah, yeah. It really makes you think about those digital dependencies.
Yeah.
And it's not even just about entertainment, right? It's about how we get our information,
Right.
the communities that we're part of, the ways that we stay connected to the world.
It's true. And it brings up another really important point, which is like digital literacy.
Yes.
This whole TikTok thing really showed how important it is to be critical about the information we see online.
Especially in those spaces where, misinformation can spread so quickly.
Right.
It's more important now than ever that we have the skills to evaluate sources and to identify bias. To separate fact from fiction. It's about being an active participant, not just a passive consumer.
So being mindful,
Yes,
questioning what you see, not just accepting everything at face value.
exactly. And also recognizing that, these platforms, as great as they are for connection and for expressing yourself, they're businesses.
Right.
They have their own agendas. They have their own algorithms.
It's true. It's a good reminder that we're not just users, we're products too.
Yeah.
Our data, our attention, how engaged we are, that's all valuable stuff in the digital economy.
It is. And that's why that whole conversation about digital rights is so important.
Yeah.
We have to be advocating for policies that actually protect our privacy, our data, our freedoms online.
It's about finding that balance, right, between all the innovation that's happening, but also regulation, making sure the digital landscape is vibrant, but also safe.
Right.
And we talked a lot about the serious side of this whole thing, the
Yeah.
political stuff, the economic implications. But I want to go back to something that I thought was so interesting, which was the humor.
Yes.
How it became this coping mechanism.
Yeah. When we're dealing with something that feels really overwhelming or just out of control, it's natural to turn to humor.
To process it, to
Yeah.
deal with those emotions.
It's like a pressure valve, right?
Yeah.
Just a way to release some of that tension.
Yeah. And in this case, it wasn't just individuals coping on their own. It was like a collective experience, those memes being shared, remixed. It created this feeling of solidarity, like everybody was in on the joke.
Yeah, and humor can be so powerful for social commentary, too.
Right.
Those memes, they weren't just funny.
Right.
A lot of them are really insightful, pointing out the hypocrisy, highlighting how absurd the whole situation was.
Yeah.
Even challenging those in power.
It's like that saying, you gotta laugh to keep from crying.
Right.
It's like humor lets you look at these really tough topics, but with a sense of detachment. You can point out the flaws, the inconsistencies, without getting totally bogged down in, like, despair.
Yeah, and it can be such a great way to connect with people who get it, who see things the same way you do.
Yeah, it's like you're saying, I see you.
Exactly.
I get it.
We're going to laugh about this together.
You're all in this together.
Yeah.
So even though that TikTok ban didn't end up happening, this whole thing was a really powerful reminder of how complex, how challenging it can be to navigate the digital landscape.
We had to look at our dependencies, our vulnerabilities,
Yeah.
the power dynamics that are at play online. But I think it also showed just how resilient online communities can be.
They're creative, they have power.
Absolutely.
And that's a message of hope, I think.
I agree.
Even when things feel uncertain, even when we might experience loss, we find ways to connect, to express ourselves, to push for a better future.
It really speaks to the best of humanity, our ability to adapt, to find the humor even in dark times,
Yeah.
to work together to actually shape the world around us.
Beautifully said. I think that's a perfect note to wrap up this deep dive.
I agree.
To our listeners, we'd love to hear from you. What digital platforms are you most reliant on? What would you do if they suddenly disappeared?
Yeah, let us know.
Share your thoughts on social media. Let's keep this conversation going.
It's been a real pleasure exploring this with you.
Likewise.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and remember, knowledge is power, especially in this digital age.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us. And keep diving deep. And I
Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Oh,
Like it like that.
Yeah.
Hey yo, listen.
drop it low to the flow. Oh,
Like it like that.
Yeah.
oh. Are you ready for this?